This is Pod Populi, podcast for the people.
The Great Love Debate. It's the Great Love Debate.
The Great Love Debate. It's the Great Love Debate.
Hi again, everyone. It's Brian Howie. Welcome to the Great Love Debate, the world's #1 dating and relationship podcast since 2015. I am here in the fine studios of Pod Populi in Boca Raton, Florida. It's very, very nice here. And over the last, year or so, we've done quite a few shows about the end of relationships. And we're not doing that to try and put a downer on things. We are in the love business here. We're selling hope around here. But sometimes the best way to get into a good relationship is to get out of a bad relationship. And we've had authors on here, and we have had broken-hearted people on here, and we've had therapists on here. And I've got somebody I've tried to get in here for a couple months now. I finally got her busy schedule to sync with mine. She's the host of the Your Amazing Divorce podcast. She's been a marriage, family, lawyer, life coach, helping out the ladies, maybe even the men for many, many years. And she's going to answer a lot of my questions, which I know are a lot of your questions because you guys have been emailing me this about for a long time. Doreen Yaffa, how are you?
I'm great. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Are there too many divorces or not enough?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know. I guess it's just about right.
It's the right amount. Maybe it's not the right ones.
No, it's, things just kind of happen in relationships. People just grow apart. So
yeah, I think so. We talked about this on a prior podcast where, the old stat that half of marriages end in divorce, but there's a big chunk that stay together unhappily. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. Kids, money, or whatever. But a lot of people stay into it because they just don't either know how or they're afraid of the process of divorce.
Absolutely. 100%.
And what are they afraid of? Are they afraid the legal paperwork? Are they afraid that it's going to be a mistake? Are they afraid that they don't know where to turn? The cost? Why do
all of it?
All of it.
I think that people generally, when they're in an unhappy relationship, an unhappy marriage, they're afraid of the unknown. People tend to stay in relationships because they know what they're getting, even though it's bad.
The devil you know.
Oh, yeah. And so, just as the humans that we are, most of us are not looking for change. We might want change, but getting there is difficult. And especially when you're in a bad relationship. So it's the cost, it's the kids, it's, what am I going to do? I'm going to lose half of everything. So, and the fear of the legal process itself is always, something that's of great concern.
How often do you run across, I get that the two biggest issues traditionally in divorce are money and custody.
Sure.
How often is it that one just doesn't want to get divorced? The emotion, how much of it is just they're not on the same page?
I think most of the time. I've been practicing now in Florida for 28 years, and I've seen a great evolution in the law. And because of the legal standard that as lawyers we're basically governed by, it's pretty simple. It's not complicated. There's an equitable distribution, there's asset division, presumption of 50-50. Not so challenging to figure out, right? Maybe they have issues as to the value of a business or the value of a real estate or something, but easy. You have custody issues, which nowadays most of the parents work out. It's primarily they just don't want to get divorced. Basically, maybe one party doesn't. Or again, they're in the process, but they're just fearful. And so everyone's in this emotional state that they're just kind of stuck in. I think as lawyers, it's our responsibility to help nudge them in that direction and let them know it's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. You're going to get to the better side of your life, and you will. And
that's a big part of it, understanding when they get through this storm that there's new opportunities and bright sunny skies and whatever. But in the heat of the emotion and whatever the reasons are for people getting divorced, it's never a good thing that something has to end that you at some point had high hopes for.
Absolutely. But they do get there. And I have to tell you, in my 28 years of doing this, I can maybe name on one hand how many people went through the divorce process and ended up being in a worse position. Very few. If I was to statistically look at it, I am sure most got to a better place.
And most are like, I wish I did this years ago.
Yeah. And you know what? Just because your family is ending in the traditional sense, it's still a family if you have children together.
Right.
And so, many people see it as a failure. I tend to see it, or help people to see, it's the beginning of some different relationship that you're going to have with your ex. And that can be a beautiful thing. I mean, I'm a prime example of that.
We're in the state of Florida as we record this, and you practice in Florida. Florida's easier than some other states. Some other states is like a long cooling off. Like I think Maryland is like that, where like you can't do anything for a year.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I know that we are one of the easier states, and there are requirements. Like here, you have to be a resident for 6 months before you can get divorced. But there's no like, if after you fulfill the residency requirement, you can get divorced. One party can want the divorce, the other doesn't need to want it. It's still going to happen. And there's no cooling off period. There's steps to get through it, but it's not like you have to wait and consider things and take, an abatement. No, it's not like that.
Now, I asked a big network TV exec one time, I go, how come there's not shows about divorce lawyers? And he said, I go, there's a lot of legal shows, but very rarely is one devoted to a divorce law, family law practice. And he goes, it hits too close to home and people don't want to watch it. But you've dove into this. You're passionate about it.
Yeah.
And you spin it on your podcast and in real life as I am doing something that's going to help people's lives. How did you get interested in this aspect of law?
I came from a divorced family. So my parents divorced when I was 5. My sister was 3. And my dad didn't want anything to do with us after that. A lot of it had to do with the fact that we were living in Massachusetts. My mother purposely relocated to Florida, so, distance-wise. And he married the woman he was having an affair with. So I guess that kind of put it into some perspective that, he chose them and his new stepdaughter over me and my sister. So I got into it because I saw my mom and I saw what she went through, and she had a really tough time. I remember as a child and a young, person, just seeing her really not recover from the divorce in a very healthy way and go into a lot of depression. Now and back, when I became older, I realized what it was. I thought there's got to be a better way, and I was affected by that, by not seeing my father. So between that, and it's really very interesting practice. It's not just about divorce. I mean, there's a lot of complicated business issues and valuation can be very sophisticated.
Right.
So, I love it.
When somebody comes to you,
everybody.
The first meeting that somebody usually has from you, they use the phrase, I'm thinking about it. And how do you gauge how far along the line they are in their thought process?
I can usually gauge that pretty quickly. So if I was statistically to look at, I think that women, when they come to see me, are pretty much ready to get divorced. Generally, they're getting information. They've kind of made up their mind. Men are kind of feeling it out more. What am I going to lose? How much am I going to pay? What is it going to cost me?
Oh no, that's so sad.
And
how big's the check?
Yeah, and they're concerned about that. Rightfully so. I get it.
You talked about the 50-50 earlier.
Yeah.
I know states differ. It's 50-50 of what you made while you were married. So if you were a wealthy guy and you got married and your wealth sort of stayed the same, she doesn't get half of that, right? Or does that depend on the state?
Well, first of all, if you're a wealthy person, not just male, but female, you should have a prenup. Side note. But yeah, so basically you look at the date of the valuation, let's say the marital estate before you got married, and then you look at the date as of the date of the filing of the divorce, and you see what you had then that remained intact and stayed separate and apart, and what you have now. And
so if she spent a bunch of your money and it went down,
that's it. It's gone. It's gone.
How do you have that conversation though? How do you have the prenup conversation without? I mean, that's got to be so awkward. Unless you're super rich and then you're like, my board is making me do this.
Well, you know what? A lot of times, especially here in South Florida, we have children of wealthy parents, trust children. We have people that have already been through divorce that have substantial wealth.
Right.
They're smart, most of them. I have to tell you that I've had more prenup signings in the last, let's say, 60 days than I've had in a long time. I'm getting them on a regular basis.
Mhm.
It's just smart. If you think about it, if 50% of the people get divorced, I don't know, kind of have to figure that out.
Yeah.
Right. And why wouldn't you? And I hear a lot of younger people getting prenups. They just want to tie that part up and not have to worry about it.
You focus mainly on women.
Not really. I focus on women for my life coaching,
Right.
but for both male and female as a divorce lawyer.
How is the process other than what you said and they come to you and they're not quite sure, but the breakup, take the infidelity out of it, take it, we just grew apart out of it. Do you try and get into the why you're getting divorced and try and say, or you're just like, okay, you want to get divorced and how much of you are you blending life coaching with divorce?
Well, I blend it, but I think any good divorce attorney, first question is your marriage irretrievably broken? Because that's one of the criteria for getting divorced. And if you can save the marriage, like I have a case right now where he doesn't want to be divorced, but the wife has some severe substance abuse issues. He'd rather her get help.
Right.
But this has been ongoing for years. And as we know, we can't force people into, treatment. So he's made a decision to get divorced. Would he prefer not? Of course. So when I spoke to him, it was all about, well, what have you tried? Have you tried to get her in therapy? And how have you tried that first? Because he doesn't want this. We tried a few more things, gave him some advice, and now we had to file. That's a first question. But from there, the life coaching, for me, it's just part of what I already did because I truly care about my clients and I want them to get to a better place. But like anything, it's a cost benefit. Sometimes you can stay and work things out. And if you can, I encourage that. And maybe open their thoughts to some of the ideas to keep the marriage together that maybe they didn't consider, like a postnuptial agreement.
Right.
Like maybe we have financial issues. The wife is spending too much or the husband's irresponsible,
like, you can take on this, let's stay together, but I don't want to be responsible for this debt if it gets out of hand.
Right.
Postnup. Yeah.
And that can work in some cases, where now they've resolved that and they can really focus in on other issues in their relationship. So
is custody easier to work out than the money?
It depends. Most of the cases that I deal with, I would say that the parties pretty much have the best interests of the children in line and they're able to work it out. It's a little, here and there, but they work through it. Other cases, not so much. And I can kind of identify those clients that have an agenda with the children really far away.
Yeah, you don't want to use the children as a weapon.
No way.
I'm always surprised at how often woman or a man, they hate each other and think they are the devil. And then they're like, oh, but he's a good father.
Oh, sure.
And they really can compartmentalize, which is shocking to me. Or they're like, we made this child together who we both love and we share this and I see the good things in the child, but they're really able to compartmentalize, which is
it's amazing.
Props to them.
It's good for them. I mean, my ex-husband, Sam, who's also a lawyer, but doesn't touch family law. He does medical malpractice and PI stuff. Him and I would consider him one of my best friends. Like
really?
Literally, I could call him at 3 a.m. I need him. He's there for me. Same here. The kids were everything.
Do you handle your own divorce? Is that normal?
Not because you have a fool for a client, right? So no, I had somebody else handle it. But at the end, we really put our lawyers aside and we went to mediation ourselves and we banged it out in 8 hours and we went to dinner.
How often does somebody either change their mind on the money, like, oh my God, I can't, I signed that and I want to go back and do it again, or you know what? I realize I still love him. Can we get this back together? Or that's not your problem.
No. I've had I call them my annuities. I've had that happen. But most of the time when we get through the process, the legal system is still, it's got a lot of problems. So just no matter how amicable, you have to do certain things in the legal process that kind of push people further apart. And it's changing slowly. But by the end, they usually don't really consider reconciliation, but I have had a few.
Yeah. We talked about that on a podcast a couple of years ago, that boyfriend and girlfriends break up and they get back together all the time, but rarely. And people are like, once the legal gets involved, it
changes everything.
It does. It changes the tone and how you see them. When somebody gets divorced, how do they understand the process of it, or how much of it, like, you have to teach them, here are the steps and here's what's going to work? And it's not just, we sit in a room and
Yeah.
here's how we find the money and here's how we realize who gets what and whatever. It's complicated. You are earning your money on this.
It's complicated. I call it the 101 of divorce. They need an education, not to a level of knowing it like I do, but they certainly need to make educated decisions. And I look to them for the answers. Here's your option. We can do this. Here's how much it's going to cost you.
Mm-hmm.
What's the cost benefit here? If you have a man who, let's not say man, if you have someone who's going to pay support and you're talking a $500 a difference month, and we're going to fight that,
Mm-hmm.
I do the actual math with them and I'll sit with them and say, we're fighting this. Could we look at this, like how much it's going to cost you in litigation and time and trial? And, let's see if we can come to a compromise here.
And you must run into, man or woman, again, not to stereotype,
Mm-hmm.
somebody who has not worked in 20 years
Or more.
or more, and maybe the assets were nothing, and suddenly they're like, oh my God, I'm 54 years old and I got to find a job.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Scary.
There's a lot of traditional marriages here.
Yeah.
That in our community where we live here in Boca, and it's changing. But I always say, listen, if you get married young, or whenever you get married, and you're going to give up your career, you got to think about that, because the courts are not awarding support alimony like they used to years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and they are expecting you, whether you're 54 or 60, to work. They're going to impute income to you.
Yeah.
And you gave up your career, and you got to take that into consideration.
Yeah. If somebody gave up their career to raise the kids, take care of the house, he was a doctor,
Sure.
he had a gambling problem, he lost it all, now we're divorced, and then he can continue working.
Sure.
Is that factor in? And then it's like, well, she gave it up, so until she can get up to a certain point, he still has to pay.
Absolutely.
That matters.
And you look at the standard of living, you look at what is considered a need versus extras. Somebody has a clothing habit every month of 10 grand. That's probably not a need, right? But there is some allowance for clothing, let's just say as an example. And then they're going to say, what is her capacity for work? And let's say, and I'm saying it's he, she, because
Mhm.
women pay alimony as well. I have it both ways. But she can work and she can make X amount of dollars. We have experts that come in and actually do an evaluation, and it's called a vocational exam. And they will basically impute income to the under-earning spouse
Mhm.
and offset the alimony need. And then the difference is paid by the one that can pay based on his or her ability.
Most alimony stops when she remarries.
Yes, that would be considered what they call permanent alimony, long-term alimony, and generally, or if they're in supportive financial relationship, that changed.
Right.
So now if you're living with somebody and you don't have as many expenses, you're being, either directly or indirectly provided support, you can offset.
Can he make the case like, listen, she loves him and they're just not marrying because they want me to pay?
Right.
Is that a case you can make?
You can, yeah. Yeah, but we get really you start digging deep into finances and subpoenaing records and figuring it out. So, I understand it. It seems fair. It seems fair.
All right, we got to take a quick break because we need to take care of our finances, but we will be back. I'm here with Doreen Yaffa, and we're talking about all things love and divorce right after this. And we are back. Are second divorces easier?
I think so.
Is it because they've been through it, or
Absolutely.
So
You
do get better at it.
Look, remember, we started talking about the unknown.
Right.
Now they know. And so that's maybe why the divorce rate for second-time marriages is higher. I don't know. But they do.
Is it because the fantasy of the happily ever after is gone?
I think so. I think there's more realistic. They're just older, wiser, as we all get in our age. But
And I went through it and I survived it, which is a big part of recidivism. If you're talking about criminal activity,
Sure.
They did the time and they survived and they got out. So they're like, part of the scariness of, oh my God, I went to jail for 5 years is gone.
yeah.
And so part of the, people look at whether it's dating or relationship as a game of musical chairs, and they don't want to get stuck without a seat. So a lot of times people would rather stay in a bad relationship than no relationship. If they got divorced and then got remarried again, a third time is not nearly as far-fetched as a second time was to them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And how is it changing that the women are paying more alimony and child support than they used to?
I think that certainly they're better earners now than they were many years ago. So that's all factored into it when you look at support, either child support or alimony. So, I have cases where women are the breadwinners. And I think with the younger generation, even more so. There's a lot of men that stay home and take on that responsibility, and that's okay. It's good,
How often do you run into, how did you ever marry this person?
Oh, but what's that expression? Elephants don't marry giraffes, or giraffes don't marry. You always wonder, like, you see this other person on the other side and you're like, oh, okay, this is really not a good person. How did you even get there?
Right.
But then you start to uncover things about your client. You're like, oh, I see how you guys connected. But sometimes, I had a really sad case where he was absolutely what do they call it? A liar. Pathological liar.
Yeah.
Diagnosed 100%, could fool anybody. And that was a really sad case because she happened to be one of the most amazing women I've ever met. Came from a great family. But he was able to convince her of things that, others couldn't. And he was good at it. But other than that, I think, people generally are just good. Relationships
I think if you walk down the aisle, you are hoping for the best. Or I think the men are. A lot of times the women, he's be a good parent, good provider, all these kinds of things, all the stereotypical things. It's still, she dreams of the house, the dog, the white picket fence. He's not even on that list. But I think when he enters into it, which is why, some very, very wealthy men who have written very big checks for divorce, you see get married for the 5th or 6th time.
They want love.
I think they do. I think they are hoping in the moment, or they're like, if I marry her, she won't leave me. There's something about like, oh, I'm going to lock her down, and they don't learn their lesson after all that time.
Yeah, we all are just in this world trying to love.
Yeah, I think so
loved,
too.
And we all want that. That's one of the higher needs, that we all have. So.
Yeah, and even when somebody goes through something incredibly painful, and they have been arguing every Tuesday in court for 3 years or whatever, there's a part of them, and that's part of your job, and that's part of our job, and that's part of society's job, is to flame that hope again and have them, because once they can see there's a possibility of, all right, once I get through this, or once I stop thinking about this, or the anger or the sadness subsides, I can start new again, and there's still time to do that.
Look, I have people getting prenuptials that are in their 80s. They found love again. They found companionship.
Right.
And they want to make sure that their estates are secure for their family. Most of them are going to have their trust all in place and all this. They just want to be together. And it's a beautiful thing.
Can you, if somebody dies without a will here, that's different. Every state's different?
Every state's different. Yeah.
And can somebody leave their estate to a dog in this state?
That's a
good
question. That's not, that's above my pay.
I know that's not, but I mean, certain states, it's like, yeah, the dog has a budget and it's 80% of the will.
Dog custody cases.
Do you?
But dogs in Florida are considered chattel property from the old days, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've had drawn out fights about who gets a dog. And the bottom line is you can't have a visitation schedule. You can agree to it separately, but you can't have, the courts won't order that.
They won't. They won't be like, you get the dogs on weekends?
There's case law right on point. One person gets a dog. It's considered property, and that's it. Huh. I know. That will change because we all love our fur friends.
Well, I mean, 50 years ago, until the 50s, dogs were not in the house.
Right.
This is a fairly new development, and a lot of countries are like that. They're working animals, and they're out and they're cows and horses or whatever. And somewhere time after World War II, we decided to let the dog in the house, and then the dog got in the bed, and the dog was a child.
And then he took over.
And then he takes over. But yeah, I didn't think about that dog or cat custody.
Oh yeah. I've had a prenup in which that was one of the issues. I get the dog.
That's got to be tough. And then do they work out visitation, or is that separate in the courts? Just like whatever you want to figure out.
They can. It's just that if you can't agree, the court's going to give the dog to one person.
Is it? I've asked some people this who have gotten divorced because somebody had an affair with somebody else.
Yeah.
And I always wondered, is it better if 20 years later they're still with that person? Because on some levels, like, well, I guess it worked out for them, or the Pierce people always were rooting for it to not work out.
No, I mean, I don't know.
I think that would make it easier. Where like, oh, I guess they were better together than we were.
Have I had those cases? Of course. And you know what? I mean, look, unfortunately, people are unfaithful from time to time. I have to tell you, it's not what I see as one of the major causes. It's really more about financials and a lot about just really communication. I know it sounds so cliche, right?
Right.
But really just not growing together. They're just growing separately. And so you have to work at it.
Right.
You have to really work at your marriage.
Right. They got lazy. They went from husband, wife to mom and dad, and then they grew apart.
And then you get comfortable. And, I say sometimes people spend more time on their financials, like writing checks, or now we do it online, than they do on really working on their relationship every month. And you got to work at it.
Is there a huge rise in divorces when the youngest kid turns 17?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a real thing.
Yeah. That's a real thing because a lot of people have a perception that it's better to stay together, even though it's bad, until the children leave.
Yeah.
I have my own personal opinion on that. I'm not a therapist. I'm not into that line of work, but I just think it's a horrible example.
You were very, very young when your parents got divorced.
Yes.
You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Is there an age where, I guess every age is tough. They're old enough to understand but not quite old enough to process it. That's a pretty big window. What do you remember about it?
I remember he took my sister and I out to lunch with her, and I thought, here I am, like probably 4 or 5 almost 5 at the time, and I thought, why am I with this lady? It felt weird to me. It felt not right as a child. Other than that, I don't have a lot of memory of it.
Right.
But I do remember it being something was wrong.
Can you work that out in court? Can she say, he can have visitation or partial custody, but not around her?
The answer is yes and no, right?
It's tough to enforce.
Yeah. So the courts in Florida are I hate to use the word liberal, but they're very understanding that both parents get to have our due process constitutional right to have our children and to parent them as we see appropriate. Mm-hmm. And if you chose to have a child with this person, then they get to make some decision on who they're going to expose the child to. So the courts are really reluctant to say no girlfriend or boyfriend around the child unless there's some best interest, like the person is using drugs or just really not a good person. But generally they don't go there. I had a lady today, she's like, well, I don't want him to have the child because he has only one bedroom and this is a divorce, like a year later, and he has a new girlfriend. The daughter is 8 from the relationship, and the new girlfriend has a child who's 6. And like, where are they going to sleep and all that? I'm like, listen, the courts are going to say he's going to figure it out. Yeah. They're 6 and 8. So
does tie go to the mother?
Does what?
A tie. It's like in baseball, the tie goes to the runner.
No.
Does a tie go to the mother?
I don't play baseball.
Okay. If it's
no,
I want the no.
Mm-mm. Nuh-uh. That was called the tender year doctrines. That was way when I first started. Primarily moms got children because they presumed that up through the age, I believe it was 2, that the mothers were necessary to care and feed and do all the things, caretaking. That was abolished. That's gone. It's really, many men get more time sharing than women.
They do.
Yeah.
I always
there are some really great dads out there.
I know, but I thought it was always tough that the court was going to be like that the woman has a lot more wiggle room behaviorally than the man would.
I think that
kind of the judge.
Perception is because it really is a caretaker. Who's been the primary caretaker? And if the mother has been, which typically in many cases is the case, then they will, but look, there's no presumption in Florida 50-50 time sharing. That's a fallacy here. That's not something we do.
Right.
But do the courts look at that? Sure they do. In their own minds.
Well, what do 2 people do if they're just like, he's the worst father, she's the worst mother?
Yeah.
Nobody's going to cave.
Prove it. You got to prove it to the court because it's best interest. And it's not easy because most of these best interest issues of bad dad, bad mom are done in the privacy of your home.
Yeah. Can the court rule 50-50 or
sure.
So the court can?
Yes.
What if somebody is which again, we're in South Florida, wealthy, they want the custody, but the custody for them means their nanny is going to do their half of the raising. Is that
That's a good question. I always say that if let's just say it's dad, right? And dad's around and he has somebody that's going to help with the caretaking, as long as he's around and, he's not every night somewhere else, why not? The courts are going to permit that. An extra set of hands, it takes a village, right?
Is it a myth that the divorces went up from COVID?
I don't know.
Or Florida wasn't quite locked down.
Yeah,
so.
You know what? I tried to figure that out, and I couldn't find stats that conclusively told me that. I didn't see any change. I mean, I saw some change in postponed filings.
Right. It might have been an illusion that afterwards, because the courts were so backed up.
Yes,
and, so
and they still
like
are.
Right. And so it looked like a spike.
Yeah.
Did you, were you able to do it the whole time? Did they do it online here?
Yeah. Yeah. So out of something bad comes something good, right? So we in our office always had Zoom because I found that clients wanted privacy. I had one lady get in the elevator once to come to my office. Guess who was in the elevator? Her husband.
Oh, man.
And couldn't explain it at all. Why was she there? She was a stay-at-home mom and housemaker and all that. And
why was he there?
Well, he was visiting somebody at one of the offices there.
And so she had no
had no idea. And I thought, ooh, this isn't good. So we got Zoom in place. But the courts now do most of the hearings, non-evidentiary hearings and smaller hearings by Zoom. Great for clients.
Yeah.
Not always good for I had a 5-day trial. You can't do that by Zoom. I mean, is it possible? Yes, but it's going to add another 3 days onto it. How do you show somebody a document?
Right.
It's really challenging.
They're not jury trials, right?
No, they're just judge.
They're just the judge.
Yeah, just the judge.
How often, so a woman comes to you, or a man, and they say, I'm thinking about getting divorced. Do you try and tell them how to sock some money away for the divorce process? Because some people don't have access to, like you brought up the woman was sneaking the meeting.
Yeah.
Well, it's tough to sneak the bill, the retainer.
It is. Yeah. So listen, everybody out there, have your own money, have your own resources, just in case. You never know. And I could get into a whole topic on that one, but because I have 3 girls, so I'm always telling them, make sure you're your own person, which I learned from my mother.
Right.
But the answer is you need your funds. And we try to, we're not like some lawyers are like, hey, the retainer's 10 grand and that's what it is. And no, it's not a one size fits all because I may be able to do the divorce and be more flexible or have different arrangements. It depends. So,
but you must charge more if it's a wealthy couple, right?
No, but you have more resources available, right? So all the billing's the same. It
is?
Yeah. It's just you're going to probably have some more complicated issues, maybe with valuation problems.
And that'll rack up the hours.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
But what do you do if you're the woman and she hasn't had her own resources?
Right.
It's old school traditional marriage.
Yeah.
Are you like, I'll get this on the back end?
No, I don't personally do that. And I don't know many good family lawyers that do or board certified lawyers, but
it's not an injury attorney.
No, exactly. You can't. In some cases, for like collection of arrearage and support, we can do that. I don't personally do it, but some lawyers do, and that's permitted. But you will get to a temporary relief hearing, and you will ask the court to impose attorney's fees and costs, and based on need and ability. So you have to jump through like about probably 60, 90 days of work.
Are people pretty good with making the payments they're supposed to make, or does that depend on the state?
They are with my firm.
Okay. Certain states are tougher too. Certain states want some is criminal and some are civil.
Yeah, I mean, here the judges understand what it takes to get a case through, and they understand the issues. And if it's complicated, you need experts involved. I mean, some cases you got valuation cases where you have a lot of businesses, and you got to bring an expert in. It's like doing a value for any purpose.
Yeah. What does somebody do who they own a business together?
Yeah.
What happens there?
One person is going to get it. If you go to trial. Now, some cases, they have agreements to work together. I have one couple, they are in business together post-divorce, and they chose to be in business because they are amazing business partners together.
And then maybe if their business fell apart, then neither one's going to get any money.
Yeah,
so,
true.
Yeah, that makes sense too.
They both have an interest, right?
Huh. What, the most common... Is there a length of time of marriage that it's kids aside? We brought up that they turn 17.
Right.
Is it the 3 to 5 year part where most divorces happen, or is it quicker or longer?
Longer. Yeah, from my experience. So I think it's somewhere around the 7 year.
That's a real thing.
No, it's a real thing. because you're still in the honeymoon stage, right?
Right.
And you start settling into more complacency after a period of time. So, yeah, 7+. I have a lot of long-term marriages too, which is anything over 18 years.
What's the longest?
Marriage I ever
Can you
had?
say? You can say.
Over 50 years they were married. I had one
And
lady.
she wanted to go back out, and he was pooped out. Is that
Let me
right?
tell you, I had one lady come to me, and this is a recent case, and she's in her 80s, and she said, I am not going to die married to him.
Yeah.
And you know what? She has a right. She has a
Right. And sometimes that's, the energy levels, the health levels.
And remember, in Florida, you get 50% if you get through a divorce, right? You get 50% generally from the assets, right? It's like a net worth statement, divide it in half. You get 30% if the person, as an estate through probate. So
Right.
30 versus 50, sometimes they get divorced because they want that higher percentage.
Yeah.
Now they can do what they want with it.
Right.
There's a lot of times there's issues with older children. They align with one parent over the other.
Over 50, over 30 years and they get
Yeah.
divorced, it's generally more amicable, or it's
no.
hard to say.
It's hard to say. It's the same.
What's the quickest you've dealt with?
Quickest divorce?
Like they got married on Friday and they're in there on Monday?
That's called an annulment. And hopefully they didn't have relations.
Well, can you get annulled?
Right.
Can you get annulled for no reason?
No, it has to be based on like fraud.
What if we had never lived together before,
Right.
we got married, honeymoon, we moved together, I can't believe he puts his socks on the floor. I cannot deal with this.
You're going to have to, yeah.
Have you had an under 30 days and you're like, this isn't working?
I have had a few like that, but they're rare. They're rare.
So it's the sweet spot is the 7 years.
Yeah. 7 years plus, 7 to like 18. When they come to me after like 20 plus years, I'm like, really? Really? So I really try to make sure that this is what they really need to do, want to do, should do.
How often are you like, oh my God, I'm on the other person's side, but this is my job as a lawyer. Like you're a terrible wife or you're a terrible husband, but I got to do my job. But oh man.
I don't take every case that comes through the door because I've had people that have agendas and I can pretty much spot that. So, or personalities that don't match with mine, because I'm going to be a straight shooter and I'm going to tell you the way it is. I'm not going to just do it to get paid.
Right.
I'm going to tell you, listen, you got to clean that, up.
Right.
Because that personality isn't going to do well for me, for you, or for your case. So I try to get a little control there, client control. And then sometimes it doesn't work out and we're just not a good match.
Or you're like, of course he's going to divorce you.
Or I look at them
read.
and I'm like, okay, I get this.
Yeah. Or it's like, oh yeah, I see what you were doing.
Oh boy, I've had those. Oh
Yeah, I mean, every divorced woman thinks she happened to marry a narcissist.
Right.
That's statistically, it's like, oh my God, there's such bad luck for everybody.
You know what? That's that term is used so often here. I think overused.
It is
but
statistically, it's like
come on.
2% of people are clinical narcissists, and,
Right.
and I'm like, maybe
Everybody's a narcissist.
Maybe he just didn't like you,
Yes.
or maybe he's just a jerk, or how often are the guys like, you know what? She really did just want my money. And is the courts like too bad? Like you didn't realize that? It's too bad, right?
Courts are too bad. It's a mathematical calculation.
Right.
What are the assets at that date of marriage, date of filing? And
That's
we're gonna
it.
divide it.
If she not quite married you under false pretenses, but the I love yous were probably not as binding as you thought they were.
Look, and we have a lot of second time marriages where the older person is marrying somebody younger, typically and the writing's on the wall. I mean, not every case,
Right.
but very often, but love comes in different forms, and maybe being taken care of and protected and knowing you're financially secure is valuable and has,
That's starting to change more too. There's more women in that situation. There's
absolute.
more sugar mamas than there used to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially down here where she has her late husband, ex-husband's money, and then she's like, I'm going to have fun with the young guy. And then he had spent 2 years, and then
That's it.
I know. What is the thing that people will be surprised to learn about getting divorced? The process of it, or
Surprised about it. It's really not that complicated.
really?
Yeah. If you can, and that's why being a life coach too is a helpful, I think, asset for my clients. But if they don't use me for life coaching and they have a therapist, look, there's the emotions of divorce, and it really needs to be separate and apart from the divorce and your lawyer. But the divorce itself, pretty simple. It's not challenging. It's all those emotions. So the biggest myth is it's really not that bad. I know you feel it is when you're in it,
Right.
but the process itself, not overly complicated.
The process has been honed over
Yes.
time by the courts and lots of lawyers. And
Absolutely.
I was why is there such a plethora of injury attorney advertising?
I don't know.
Was there a law change or something that it's every billboard now?
It's every
because like there used to not
everybody
be
in the morning. I mean,
well, there used to be liquor. There used to be a ban on liquor advertising on television, and then that went away, and we
Yes.
see more of it. So nothing changed, and suddenly everybody's a
I don't know.
personal injury attorney.
Yeah, I mean,
I went through that. I was in a car accident a couple years ago. I broke 13 ribs and a lot of other
God,
things.
sorry.
Ribs are nebulous. They hurt a lot, but
they're recoverable.
so they said, right.
There's no damage.
There's no surgery.
There's no ultimate right, and you can
It's tough to
get
rack
back.
up the bills on it. And so
Yes.
it's one of those things. So the lawyer's like, by the time we get to court on this, you're going to be fine.
You know,
And it's hard to describe how much it hurt.
That's what my ex-husband does. And you'll have a horrific accident, you know, and I'm sure it was extremely, you know, painful, and you lost wages and time and all that. But if you can recover physically,
Yeah.
then you don't have the damages, the permanent damage.
Right.
From what I know, because that's not my expertise.
You know, because I know. So it's like by the time if you heal, people are like, oh, yeah, broken ribs, terrible. It sucks. I'm like, I had 13 of them. And they're like, yeah, you're fine now. So we had to settle it long before we went to court, because the longer we waited, the more healed I was. I know.
Thank God, right?
I know. Thank God.
It's a good thing, too.
It was a good thing, but I was surprised at how, well, this was worth this, and this is worth this, and then there's pain and suffering, and here's the insurance, and here's what they were. It was very, very like people had gone through this a million times.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. This is your first time on the podcast.
Yeah.
We play something with our guests called worst date or first date. So you have to think back to your swinging single days.
Okay.
Give me either the worst date you've ever had or the best first date you've ever had. Your choice.
First best date.
Yes.
Or best first date.
Either the best first date or a terrible date of any
Best
number.
first.
Okay.
And I can see him from where I'm sitting right now.
Oh, good.
My husband, my current husband. We met on July 3rd, 12 years ago. And we met for lunch and at the mall here. And I got out, you know, of work at the time. And we spent I canceled my entire day.
Mm-hmm.
And the next day, that was on a Friday, July 3rd. And I saw him the next day, and I got married in 4 months.
Fireworks.
Yeah.
Wow.
Amazing chemistry, just like safety chemistry. I can't even explain.
How long were you single?
Oh, couple years.
Couple years.
Yeah, and I had dated, you know, the here and there, but I was never really a dating type. I am busy. So, and I have 3 young children.
Right.
Yeah.
So
But,
you married,
fireworks.
date, fireworks the next night.
Yeah.
4 months later.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Can I ask where you met?
Yeah. We met at the Grand Lux.
The restaurant?
Yeah. At the mall
Which mall is that?
on Town Center.
Oh, yeah, right here in
Yeah.
Boca Raton.
Yeah.
Well, there, it all goes down
It
right
all
here
goes
at Boca
down
Raton.
there. And so
Good for
that
you.
was it. Yeah.
All right, where can everybody find you if they need a lawyer or listen to your podcast?
Okay, so it's Your Divorce, Your Amazing Divorce. And then my email address is Doreen Yaffa, and the last name is spelled YAFFA at yaffafamilylawgroup.com, and 561-276-3880.
Good job. This was fun. I've never been married or divorced, but now I'm not so scared of either.
Okay, just remember prenup.
Noted. See, that to me would be hard. I'm like, I just
know.
slip it across the table at Grand Lux
It's
on the first
okay.
date.
It's okay. It's not for everybody.
That's
but,
not
you
for
know.
everybody, but you're right.
I can try.
Logistically, at least you have something. The worst thing is like you don't have anything. Like prenup, like sure.
Right, true.
You don't-
That's true.
All right. As far as us, like, share, follow. Please review not just Your Amazing Divorce, but our podcast too. Your reviews mean a lot in the podcasting ecosystem. Shoot us an email, greatlovedebate@gmail.com if you've got any questions, comments, thoughts, or divorce horror stories. We might do a whole episode on that because, as always, at the Great Love Debate, we never stop making love. See you next time.